Welcome back to Nuggets of Gold. We are going to be talking about the top defensive performers of this first preseason week. I had 4 guys that I kind of highlighted, guys I thought looked really good. Those 4, Arden Key, Jonas Griffith, Talanoa Hufanga, also known as Huff, that's what they call him, Mador, Lenore. Those are the 4 guys for me. I think the biggest guy that I don't know if I'd say not expecting to flash because he has had really good training, like a really good training camp, but it was Arden Key. Arden Key looked really fast, really strong. He's also a pretty big guy coming around the edge. He looked like an amazing depth piece for this team. And we've talked about, how great the 49ers defensive line is. I think everyone realizes that this is a deeper line than the Niners had in 2019. It's not as top heavy. I mean, you're missing Buck. That's the big guy you're missing. But Arden Key looks like he can be a fantastic rotational edge piece. Aiden, you kind of alluded that he could have almost like a Kerry Hyder type role. I will say Arden Key's physical traits are a lot better than Kerry Hyder. Now, Kerry Hyder is a better technician, but Arden Key was, he came out of, it was the 3rd round. I know he went to LSU. I think it was the 3rd round. He had some first round hype when he was coming out of LSU. And he's one of those guys that he could be a late bloomer. So what are your thoughts on Arden Key? Did you like what you saw? And do you think that he's almost kind of locked in as this, like, after, Ford, Armstead, and Bosa, is he that next guy off the bench for this team?
Yeah, I would think so. And say D Ford is going to have some sort of setback. I think he's the guy who's going to do that D Ford role more than like a guy like Ebucam. I think that they have some different plans for him. But yeah, he was super impressive coming out of college. If I'm not mistaken, he had to take a year off. When he was first gonna come out, he was thought to be like a top 10 pick. But then he had to take a year off because of some off-field stuff that ended up being marijuana and rehab related, which as we've seen now, the NFL is a lot more lenient on. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, but didn't have a great time with the Raiders, the team that he was drafted by. I don't think that culture was necessarily right for him. And he's a guy who, when he got released and picked up by the 49ers, was like, thank goodness. So I think that he's a dude who has really appreciated being around this defensive line culture. I think it's fun to be a defensive lineman with the 49ers. You're given a role and you're able to just pin your ears back and get after the passer. And he's a dude, I think that you mentioned it. He's 6'5" and he looks 6'5". But he's also, when he came out of school, he was pretty thin. He's bulked up substantially. And super excited to have a guy who I think he could be a better version of Ronald Blair, which is kind of like a low end comp, but a guy who comes off the bench, makes a couple wow plays, and is potentially able to parlay that into a bigger contract next season, whether it be with the 49ers or maybe a team like the Seahawks wants to overpay again.
Yeah, I was kind of talking about him. It's like, if he looks as good as he looked, and granted, he's playing against, mostly the second unit of offensive linemen. But the other thing to factor in is that in training camp, he's been getting so much praise. And like they've been talking about, like, oh, this guy looks so good. You brought up that the Raiders released him. They also released Mo Hurst, and Mo Hurst kind of said the same thing. Or I don't know if they released Mo Hurst, but he left the Raiders organization, went to the Niners this offseason. And they both kind of said the same thing, like, we're really happy where we're at. So really intriguing that this is a guy that, could be a late bloomer. And he flashes like you said, like 6'5", looks like he's 6'5". He looks like a dude that is a star defensive end. Now, he has not played like a star defensive end. I do not expect him to, come out here and have like a 10+ sack season, nothing like that. But as a rotational piece, I think he is excellent for this team. And it's something that a lot of teams really lack. A lot of teams really lack, like depth defensive linemen and especially depth edge rushers. And it seems like that might be the 49ers strongest point right now at this roster. So really excited to see like how he continues to look. But other guy, Jonas Griffith, who I had not heard a lot about, he absolutely flies around from the linebacker spot. They were talking about on the broadcast, Tamiko Ryan's vouched for him last year as a UDFA. And just watching last night, just based off that, because we know the linebacker spot is pretty thin outside of Fred and Trey, he very well could be the backup Mike linebacker, and he looks like he's going to make the roster. What were just your thoughts on seeing him on the field? Because I thought he was everywhere. Like every time a tackle's there, he might not be the first guy, but he's coming in like that second wave. I mean, Robert Saleh's thing was always all gas, no brakes. Well, I mean, this guy, he looked like that's how he plays. So I love the way he flew around the football. Did you like what you saw out of him?
Yeah, he played fast, which is the biggest thing that I like to see. The Niners picked up Michael Kendricks this morning, which is interesting and makes me think he's going to play more of an off-ball role. Kind of hurts for a guy like Aziz, but he may not even make the roster. But I think that you bring up a great point about Jonas Griffith. He's a guy who I think that you mentioned Tamiko went to bat for him. And I think he went to some small school, I think Indiana State, and really looked good. And he's a guy where, I mean, we need more depth at linebacker. If Fred goes down, we're screwed regardless. But obviously, want a guy who can play inside, outside, and I think Jonas Griffith is a guy who could do that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of shapes out because, yeah, like you said, Michael Kendricks got signed very early this morning. But I also think that he's a little bit different of a role, where it does seem like Griffith is it seems like he's locked into that backup spot, which, I mean, I didn't think that we'd be able to tell that after, this first game. But you just see him all over the field. And the reason why I try not to, put too much emphasis on these preseason games, but when you see a guy like that is like exactly what the 49ers like culture and defensive mindset is, and he's going out there and he looks, exactly like what you'd want this guy to do. Not to mention the defensive coordinator loves him. And the defensive coordinator is a former middle linebacker. So like, that's kind of like, I feel like that's almost like the writing on the wall of this guy's making the roster and he's going to be Fred's backup. Another guy, I mean, we've talked about this guy. He's almost like the definition of flying around the football, hitting guys very hard. Hufanga. They call him Huff. He is a perfect player. You plug him in on the kickoff team and he drills the returner. Like they have him at safety. I don't think he's a long-term safety, but he's a great football player. He's a very violent football player. When we were talking about him, Aiden, you said every time he hits him, the guy's going backwards. So were you excited after seeing this guy? He comes out of USC, high profile, big name guy that kind of goes later in the draft, but were you excited to see him? And, he's a very fun guy to watch.
Absolutely. He was the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, and I think that you hit it right on the head. He's not a safety. He's a football player. He's a guy who, when he got drafted, said he wanted to be a special teams pro bowler, and we saw that yesterday. Made a couple of big special teams tackles, and he can do so many different things. And he's a guy where I think he could play linebacker. I think he could play safety. He's not an awesome coverage guy, but he's a guy who he's really just a gamer. I think we saw him struggle at the beginning of training camp in more of a practice setting, but he's a guy that when the pads come on, people have to be flying around. He's a guy who I trust to make tackles, and so excited to see what he does going forward.
I remember you were telling me that he would, like you said, he struggled when it was 7-on-7 type of practices. And then the very first practice in pads, he told me, "Oh, guess who was the top performer of the day?" And it was Hufanga, because he would, he just pumped, just get animated to go out there and basically make a lot of contact. But he's a guy that I think should be expected to. I call him like almost like a gadget defender. I mean, we mostly hear that term in like on offense, where it's like, oh, this guy, they run jet sweeps, they run stuff line of scrimmage, he'll line up in the backfield, almost like like Cordell Patterson. But he's kind of like that guy for the defensive side of the football. I don't know where he's going to like translate to positionally, but I think that he's a guy you could see just come in and line up, third down. He might just be an extra blitzer. He might be sitting in as like a backer, or I do think that right now they have him at safety, but like I said, like you saw, like his coverage skills aren't great, and that's why he slid in the draft. But if you use him in a role where it's like, all right, you're just kind of going to be a game wrecker, I think that he could really flourish in that role. And I think that we saw that in this first game, is that he's just all over the field on special teams. And really, I think what we should all expect from him moving forward is that, just fantastic special teams play. So really hyped about that. Final guy, got to bring up Lenore, Mador Lenore. Dude looked fantastic. Now, the thing that I think most people are going to talk about is interception. I don't think that's why he looked so good. I think he looked really good because he looked really sticky in coverage. Like, he's on guys' hips. They threw a wheel route to him, and he was just right there. It was not really a window at all. And there was a couple of plays where he's just flying around. There was one play where they threw a ball in the flat. I don't remember if he was on man on the outside guy or if it was just like a cover 3, but he flies up and he makes a tackle, and they stop him about a yard or two shy. Like, he looked pretty solid in, like run support and stuff like that. And I'll say this right now. I think that he should absolutely be the 49ers' first corner off the bench. Right now, it has been said that Dante Johnson is kind of that fourth corner right now. I think that you got to put Lenore in that spot. And I do it's early on in camp, so it's not like that's locked in or anything. But this is a rookie that they really liked, apparently. He's outplaying Ambry Thomas. I mean, without question, early on in camp and in yesterday's game, he's absolutely outplaying Ambry Thomas. And I really think that he's a guy that he could be a starting corner as soon as next season. We see that all of the 49ers corners are once again going to be free agents. He's almost slated to be a 2022 starting corner. And I think we're going to see a lot of Lenore this season. I really expect that.
Yeah, I think that he's a really, really good player. I'm in a bit of an interesting position with him because as an Oregon football fan for most of my life, he went to Oregon. I remember watching him commit. I like tuned in and watched the live stream of him committing, which is funny to see him now balling out for the 49ers in the preseason. But I think you hit it right on the head. He had an interception yesterday. Was a good concentration. Was a little bit beat and it bounced off the guy's hands, but would have been there for a tackle for like a 6-yard gain. Not the end of the world. But he's a dude when he was at Oregon, also a gamer, would come out and just make plays. Did a bunch of played some safety, played some corner, did a lot of different things. I think long term he probably projects as a K1 Williams type guy, but he's playing outside right now and he's playing really, really well, which is really exciting. I didn't expect him to beat out Ambry Thomas this quickly. And I think Ambry Thomas is a little bit more of a project given that he sat out last year. But I mean, it boils down to this for me. Dante Johnson has been a member of the 49ers like 25 different times. He's been picked up, cut. You know what you have. Let's throw the rookie and even the second rookie out there to see what you have. Like, it's important to roll the dice, especially early, because I think in these first 3 weeks, the 49ers should think about starting 2-0 at the very least, starting with the Lions and then the Eagles. I think those are 2 winnable games, regardless of who's playing that fourth corner spot. But if I was Kyle, I would be saying, let's just see what we have here. TBD on if that's going to happen, and that might even defer to a guy like Tamiko Ryan's. But Demo looked really good yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. So those were our top performers of this week 1. Hopefully these guys continue to flash. Hopefully, Ambry Thomas has a little bit of a bounce back game. And, we see some of these other defensive linemen, really play well, because that defensive line is looking really scary. And I'll say this Lenore, like him looking really good is huge, because that corner, the overall defensive secondary is by far the weakest part of the team in terms of depth. Now, they have some really good players, that are starting, Jimmy Ward, Jason Verrett, but overall in terms of depth, that's probably where there's the least depth on the whole team. So a guy like Lenore coming out there balling out, that makes a huge difference. But that's going to do it for this segment.